I live in a small town where everyone knows each other, a place where time seems to stand still. The houses are old, with creaky floorboards and peeling paint, and the streets are lined with trees that loom like ancient sentinels. It's the kind of town where nothing much happens, and that's the way the townsfolk like it. But something changed when the new neighbors moved in. The house across the street had been vacant for years, a gray, decaying structure that seemed to sag under the weight of its own history. No one knew why it had been abandoned or why it had remained empty for so long. Some said it was haunted, others whispered about a tragic event that had taken place there years ago, but no one could remember the details. It was just one of those things that was better left unspoken. Then, one day, a moving truck appeared out of nowhere. I watched from my window as a couple, pale and thin as shadows, emerged from the truck. They moved with a strange, jerky grace, as if they weren't used to their own bodies. They didn't speak to each other or to the movers. They simply pointed and gestured, directing the placement of their few belongings with an eerie silence. Their furniture was sparse, old-fashioned, and seemed to belong to another era. A large, ornate mirror, a cracked leather armchair, and an ancient-looking wardrobe were the only pieces that were unloaded. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the truck drove away, leaving the couple standing on the porch of their new home, staring out at the world with eyes that seemed far too dark. For weeks, I didn't see them leave the house. There were no cars in the driveway, no visitors, no signs of life at all. The only indication that anyone lived there was the faint light that glowed from the windows at night, a sickly yellow that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I told myself it was none of my business, that I should just ignore them, but there was something about that house, something about those people that made it impossible to look away. One night, as I was lying in bed, I heard the whispering. It started as a soft, low hum, barely audible above the sound of my own breathing. But as I strained to listen, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they were clear enough to make out words. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest, and looked toward the window. The light in the gray house was flickering, casting strange, shifting shadows across the lawn. I felt a pull, a compulsion to go outside, to see what was happening. Against my better judgment, I slipped out of bed and crept to the window. The whispers were louder now, almost a chant, and I could see movement inside the house. The shadows on the walls twisted and writhed as if they had a life of their own. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I couldn't look away. I was drawn to that house, to whatever was happening inside it. I watched as the front door slowly creaked open, revealing a sliver of darkness beyond. The chanting grew louder, and I could see the couple standing in the doorway, their faces obscured by shadow. They were beckoning to me, their movements slow and deliberate. Come ... see ... double quotes the whispers urged, and I found myself walking toward the door, my feet moving of their own accord. I crossed the street, the cold night air biting at my skin, but I felt nothing. I was numb, as if in a trance. The door was wide open now, and I stepped inside without hesitation. The interior of the house was even more unsettling than I had imagined. The walls were covered in dark, peeling wallpaper, and the air was thick with the smell of dampness and decay. The furniture was arranged in a strange, haphazard way, as if it had been placed there by someone who had never seen a home before. The large mirror hung on the wall opposite the door, its surface dull and cracked. It seemed to pulse with the same sickly yellow light that filled the room. The couple stood in the center of the room, their faces still hidden in shadow. They didn't speak, but I could feel their eyes on me, watching, waiting. The whispers were all around me now, a cacophony of voices that seemed to come from the walls, the floor, the very air itself. I turned to the mirror, unable to resist the pull any longer. As I looked into its cracked surface, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The reflection staring back at me wasn't my own. It was distorted, twisted, as if the mirror was showing me a version of myself that didn't belong in this world. My face was pale, gaunt, with eyes that were too dark, too empty. My mouth hung open in a silent scream, and behind me, I could see the couple, their faces now fully visible. They were grinning, their mouths stretched into impossibly wide and natural smiles. Their eyes were black pits, voids that seemed to suck in the light around them. They were no longer just my neighbors, they were something else, something inhuman. And they were pleased, so very pleased, to have me there. I tried to turn away, to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. I could feel the darkness closing in around me, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. The mirror seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, drawing me in, pulling me closer. I could see my reflection beginning to change, to twist and contort into something monstrous. My skin turned gray and mottled, my eyes sank deeper into my skull, and my mouth stretched into a hideous grin, mirroring the couple's. I was becoming one of them. No, I screamed, finally finding my voice. I wrenched myself away from the mirror and stumbled backward, crashing into the decrepit furniture. The couple didn't move, but their eyes followed me, their grins never wavering. The whispers turned into mocking laughter, echoing through the room, through my head, as I scrambled to my feet and bolted for the door. I burst out into the cold night air, gasping for breath, and slammed the door behind me. The whispers stopped abruptly, leaving an oppressive silence in their wake. I stood there, trembling, staring at the house, half expecting the couple to come after me. But the door remained closed, and the house was dark and silent once more. I ran back to my own home, my heart pounding in my chest, and locked the door behind me. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, their grins, and my own distorted reflection staring back at me from the mirror. The whispers had stopped, but the silence was even worse. It was as if the house across the street was waiting, biding its time. The next morning, I told myself it had been a nightmare, a hallucination brought on by lack of sleep or stress. But when I looked out the window, the gray house was still there, unchanged, as if nothing had happened. The couple was gone, though I had no idea where they could have gone. There were no cars in the driveway, no movement inside. It was as if the house had swallowed them whole. I tried to go about my day as if nothing had happened, but the image of the mirror, of my twisted reflection, was burned into my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake, to come back to the house. The whispers were gone, but the memory of them lingered, haunting me. Days turned into weeks, and the house remained silent. No one in the town seemed to notice or care that the couple had disappeared. Life went on as usual, but I couldn't forget. I found myself drawn to the window every night, staring at the gray house, half expecting to see the sickly yellow light flickering once more, but it never did. Then, one night, as I was lying in bed, I heard a sound that sent a chill down my spine. It was faint at first, barely audible, but as I listened, it grew louder, more distinct. It was the sound of scratching, like nails on wood, coming from inside the walls of my house. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, as the scratching grew more frantic, more desperate. I got out of bed, moving slowly, silently, and followed the sound. It led me to the basement, a place I rarely visited. The door was slightly ajar, and as I pushed it open, the scratching stopped abruptly, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The basement was dark, the only light coming from a small, flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. I hesitated at the top of the stairs, my hand trembling on the railing. I didn't want to go down there, but something compelled me to move forward. The silence was oppressive, pressing down on me, and I could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching my every move.